Hi, and welcome to another episode of Garmology, a podcast about clothes and stuff. Now, today we are off to London to talk to a very busy young man. Um, I'm coming in a little bit blind here, so I'm just going to say, Anthony, would you like to
Yeah,
introduce yourself?
yeah. So my name's Anthony Princi. I'm originally from Australia. I've been in London now for 10 years. Obviously background's fashion. I mean, we can go, my background, it's extensive. It goes on forever. But yeah, I've been in London now for 10 years. I was in Paris for a little while working out there. So Nick got in contact with me through our platform, which is Fashion Department London. It's something I've been working on with a close friend of mine. Um, yeah, that's it. And then I'm also working as a design director for another brand, another London-based brand. So the idea for Fashion Department was something else to kind of give me, I think, the other side of the industry where it's not the design side. I've always wanted to use it as a platform essentially to just kind of give a little bit more feedback, because the way that I've always looked at it, coming from a manufacturing background from the food industry with my family, it's there's a lot of things that don't translate and don't carry over in a lot of ideologies. So when it comes to manufacturing, when it comes to process, when it comes to operations, and then I took a lot of that into the event industry, and now I'm like, right, I want to take this into the fashion industry. I studied fashion in Melbourne at RMIT before moving to London College of Fashion. And, I worked for big brands, I've worked for small brands, and I've worked in every capacity, everything from internship, tailor, assistant, freelance designer, in-house designer. And now I'm getting to manage my own team through our brand, Adon. But then I wanted to use this side of my work experience and everything that I'm doing to try and start to give a little bit more insight into the development and what actually happens to make things happen. I think what people don't actually realize is that a lot of your creativity is dictated by your logistics. And the better that you can become when it comes to the logistics and problem solving, the more you can open yourself up to in terms of actually creating a garment. So this is something that we're working on. And, right now I feel like with Fashion Department, we're very much still in our first phase, growing phase, understanding what the audience wants. But, we're already partnering with UAL. So we've been running short courses with the University of Arts London, so St Martin's and London College of Fashion, and I'm constantly in contact with them because I'm trying to change the way that they deliver education to treat it more as training rather than schooling. That thing is I loved university when I was here because I was a little bit older and I really, I guess, abused all the facilities that were available to me here. And but coming out the other side of it, you realize how little you're actually taught about industry, and you realize how little you're actually taught about how the industry works. You get taught how to design, you get taught how to create cohesive collections, how to develop ideas. And I think that's what I was doing a lot at the beginning when we started Fashion Department. So it was very much, I know, I was always obsessed with sampling, very physical. I didn't, as much as I love drawing, I think one of the best kind of feedback that I got from one of my tutors was beginning of final year in menswear. And they said to me, they go, don't draw. They go, we do not want to see you draw, make, just make. And that's something now that I take into the studio. We don't draw. When people think that they need to be artists and, a drawing is a communication tool, and that's realistically all it is. And when I was working for Balmain, and when I was working in Paris, and that's top level company. Even when I was working, I'd done bits with Burberry as well. It's like there's not these beautifully illustrated drawings. There's technical drawings. Or I remember coming into our office one day when I was in Paris, and there was a scribble of a shirt, and it was left on the desk next to a sample. And my manager, and he goes, and I'm like, oh, what's that? Like, it looked like a child draw. And he goes, oh, creative director drew it. And he goes, that's what we're doing with this sample. And it's just guiding the direction of what the embroidery was doing. So this is when you start to realize, oh, where had I been wasting a lot of my time when it came to, from the educate, when I was studying, like when I first started, I'd draw for hours to the point that my hand hurt. But I will time to time, but I will use it as a part of my process to kind of understand what I'm doing with something. So there's a lot of these little things and tools, this kind of misguided thought process behind what actually takes to, I guess, develop a garment. And I think when you're in design school, when you're in fashion school as well, that idea of product development is frowned upon. And people don't look, they kind of look at design and garment development as two different things. But the better you understand the ins and outs of something, and I think that was something with me. I was always obsessed with how things are made. I'd be in shops, feeling the seams, feeling through the seams, to think about and just understanding what's happening. How even when it came to like looking at tailored jackets in a ready-to-wear market, it's like, do they have the inlay? Do they have the extra seam allowance in there where you can let something out to kind of alter those things? And those are the things that really separate a good garment from something's a little bit more poor quality. But I think that's really what I want to try and get across with fashion department, and that's something we're going to work towards.
So I'm already sort of falling off my chair here now. I normally start by saying what has brought you to where you are today,
Yep.
but I sense that would be the next 4 hours or so.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
but if we could just start with the fashion department, I mean,
yeah.
in summary, what is it? What do you offer? I mean, I followed your Instagram for a while, fascinated.
Well, right now, what we're doing is right now we're in a building phase. And so right now we're still we're starting to go into phase two of what we're doing. And that was, we're starting to interact with the schools. I'm alongside working at the brand, I'm doing consultancy. And I'm trying to find the best way to kind of take it forward as a business. So I think before I started this and how we kind of got to fashion department, it was, I used to have a brand with a friend of mine before I was working on this brand. And you realize that when, if you have a brand, there's so few ways that you can actually monetize. And it's very difficult to diversify your income. And especially because, there's a lot of investment needed when it comes to world building, community building. And it's like, especially when it's clothing. And I think that's something that never really came natural to me, was selling a product. And I felt like what I had to take a step back and look about, what did I actually love? And it's the garments, it's the construction, it's being in the manufacturing. But when it actually came to doing here's our shirt, buy this, trousers, like, buy this. Because my involvement in the brand now as the design director, clothing focus, like that's everything me. Anything else that's PR, brand focus, I don't have anything to do. And I kind of made a point not to be involved in that. So I think fashion department has given that an extra level of depth to really think about that and what I want to do. So I've kind of looked at this in terms of consultancy. I was doing a lot of consultancy, but the thing is, I looked at it as like, well, you're getting paid for your time. So there's only so many things you can do. So I had to start to think outside. It's like, how can I build something that's a little bit more scalable? And I think education and training is always something that's I felt really natural with. I worked during COVID. I was working as a private tutor. I was helping students get into, UAO, into London College of Fashion. I was guiding them through the foundation program. I had some of the students that I helped get into the schools graduate this year and last year. So that's nice to kind of see the progression, and I still stayed in contact with them throughout, and to try to have instill these things with them, would be like, this is how you need to be working. Like when I was at school, I was quite methodical in the way that I work. I think the teachers and things like that, I was always labeled as a technical designer, and it was always frowned upon. in a way. And now that I look back at it, it's not that I was so much a technical designer. I think I just became obsessed with how things were made, that I kind of had this connotation. I just had this, I was just labeled with this. But because I was, so curious about how things were made and things being made perfectly, it is that thing where I always tell students, it's like, okay, yes, you want to make something distressed, but you still need to consider how it's made. It's like, if you're going to use a distressed seam, is it going to fall apart? You can still do a distressed seam in a very durable way. So this is something that I want to bring back into the education, like to bring, how can we bring this into industry? Because right now the problem with education and industry, the gap's too big. This is what we want to fill. So now what we're doing is we're working on phase 2. So we're rebuilding our website. We're completely redeveloping it. And we're trying to develop it to be something that's more system-based rather than just educational. We're trying to work more with the universities to develop products and develop tools and even develop ways of learning, because even when it came to delivering a lot of the tutorials that we would work with at university, the way it was delivered, it was very difficult because it's not very visual. Essentially, you'd walk into a class where you're making a shirt and you're just given a whole bunch of little pieces and you're essentially trying to figure it out. And like, yes, you have the technicians that are there, but they've still been doing the same thing for the past God knows how many years. And I'm like, I looked at this and I was like, there has to be a better way to deliver this. As visual people, where now attention span is becoming less and less and less. It's like, how can we kind of create new ways of working that can actually instill lifetime value as well? Because that was something that I look back at uni, and when you're trying to learn a million things all at the same time, there's nothing to refer back to, because there's only so many things that you can retain when you're trying to understand how pockets and zips and all these things are made. And they blame the students, but what naturally happens is you'll learn a technique, there's one or two things that become rather difficult, and people will go their entire university career and avoid those. I had a friend of mine with pockets. He couldn't understand the mechanics of how to really iterate and really develop pockets in an interesting way, because they can become quite technical. And this is why I always say, I go, if you can make really intricate, detailed pockets, you can make anything. So that's how I naturally got better at construction. Was I was obsessed with pockets, and it kind of came from when I was working at Levi's as a tailor. And one of my first jobs there was I was learning under the bespoke tailor, the Lot 1 tailor at the Regent Street store, Elizabeth Radcliffe. And like, she was insane. She was bespoke like a Savile Row trained tailor. And she was the head of all the bespoke tailors for Levi's, like worldwide. So I was really lucky to work in the same building as her, and they would give me a lot of these she'd give me a lot of these really complicated alterations, where you'd get a lot of women come in with their tiny little pockets on their jeans, and we'd have to kind of cut everything up and make them longer. And so I really got to understand really intricate alteration. So that made me really confident with construction and actually being able to, at the studio, I call it damage control. We don't, like, the way that we work, we very rarely do numerous samples like the traditional way of working. People will do 4 or 5 samples before they got the final piece. 90% of everything that we do, I go straight into final sample. If things need to be changed and altered, I just go, it's fine, damage control, leave it to me. I can alter anything. I can fix anything. So I think I kind of had that a little bit. I learned to have that little bit of courage when it came to making. And I was very lucky because I managed to just fall into a job as a tailor at Levi's. And then, use that. Obviously, I'm getting better at work. I'm getting paid to sew, and then getting better at uni as well. So that put me in a really interesting position. But going into industry past graduation, you realize that everyone's doing the same thing. In the UK alone, you've got 5,000 fashion design and apparel graduates applying for 500 jobs. What I've seen now, especially, is a lot of these schools are really pushing the creative side and you're getting probably about 60% of these students not graduating with the correct skills. And it's because they're having the pressure. The universities, you can't blame I can't blame the tutors. The tutors are only being told what they're being told to do by the universities. But there's no learning support for them. You've got, last time I went and met with one of the technicians, she's the head technician at St. Martin's, and I said, okay, at any given time of the year, what's the ratio of technicians to students? And she said, best case scenario, 120 to 4. And I'm like, how are 4 technicians supposed to support the learning of 120 students? And they said, worst case scenario, your final term, you've got 600 students in one building. They will get outside help. And she goes, but it might be 10 at most, 10 to 600. And this is common because what's happening is the shift is being pushed towards these hyper creative, and I'm sure that you see right now, it's like all these student graduate collections. And the way I'll look at it is like, okay, yes, okay, you've done this big crazy thing, but that's costume design. There is nothing. How many things are you going to be able to, like, there's not a lot of people that are going to be able to walk into, some people go, oh, my dream job would be to work in couture in Paris. And so, can you work in France? Can you speak French fluently? Those are the key things, because some people would said that about the work that I was doing, and I'm like, and then you realize, I'm like, yeah, that would be cool, but I don't speak French. I don't speak there are a lot of these things that you don't realize and you don't get taught. Also, another big thing is people think that they're going to graduate and go intern in Paris, but there's very specific documentation and insurance policies that fall under, being an intern in Paris, and you have to be an active student. So a lot of these people end up dropping off. What happens is a lot of these students end up trying to start their own brands. And I think people do forget fashion design doesn't always get thrown into this box as it being a business at the beginning. And I think people forget is that you need to set this, if you are going to take this serious, you do need to set this up as a business. You need to think more methodical. You need to think about your stock. You need to think about what your product, what your USP is, why are people going to buy your product instead of someone else's product? And there are so many steps in between people. And I really hate when people come to me, it's like, oh, you just make something and you sell it. It's not that easy. Going through these levels of production, even just how to communicate with manufacturers. And I think this is a big problem that I get when I speak to these manufacturers, is that people are coming in and they don't know actually physically how to talk to them. They don't know how to communicate with them. They don't have the right skills to be able to discuss what they actually want. And this is something that we've been seeing, is that there has been a decline in the understanding and the making of a garment, because people are coming with things that are just hyper creative, and there's no learning support there to bridge them from what is education to what is industry. So this is something that we're trying to fill within those early stages of fashion department. So the first one, we're looking at the beginning of the life cycle of a fashion designer, looking at those really intense tutorials to get people to start to understand construction, people to understand the seams, where do they go, what do they use for, even things when I'm telling people like the distribution of bulk, when it's you're looking at different types of seam allowances, when it's meeting, how it should act. There's a lot of these things that people don't realize. I'm like, it does kind of get to engineering to a degree when you really have to understand these materials and how they come together. So that's what we want to start to go at the beginning. The next, for the phase 2, for the launch of the website, then the new website, then we're going to look at the communication side of it, where we're starting to build really intense courses for the communication when it comes to technical drawing. But I want to get it to we're going to do it to the level of technical drawing to what I was doing in Paris, where we were doing intense level pattern brushes and artworks for using Illustrator. Because that was another thing as well. Like, people didn't realize the power of like Adobe Illustrator, and sometimes I don't even think Adobe does. It's like I completely changed the way our studio works, retraining all our pattern cutters and junior designers and everything to do all our pattern cutting on Illustrator. Because I'm sure that you've seen traditional studios, and in the background you've just got walls of cardboard patterns.
Oh yeah.
And I come out of uni and I'm like, my body was in bits because you're hunched over a table all day. You've got sore back, sore this, sore that. But then I realized, and also coming from Australia, I go back a lot, and I'm like, it stopped me being able to work. So, there were a few times in I guess my career where I'd had these light bulb moments, and I realized I can do everything on Illustrator. I can do everything from here. If I need to send my patterns to a sample maker or someone abroad, I can send it over WhatsApp. So that was when I really started to think about the methodology and the operations behind a brand. I think this is something so simple. It's a program that the industry are already trained to use. Why are we using it for 10% what it's worth? Because it's actually working in this manner has actually made the communication of my product much clearer, to the point where I'm getting perfect samples 90% of the time. And it was the understanding of manufacturing and seeing what the problems are. A lot of people will send a 50-page tech pack to a manufacturer, but what happens is the tech pack sits in the office, the production manager's walking around, the seamstress is just like, I think it's like this, and it gets done like that. And that's happened to me with something that's gone into production. So then I started to think, so what are the one thing that the pattern cutters always have in front of them? It's the pattern, if it's written there. So now I've eliminated all my tech packs. I've eliminated working and pattern cutting in a traditional way, like hunched over a table. So now on a long pattern cutting table, I can have four designers sitting there working at the computers, developing all their patterns. I've been able to send things from abroad when I've been in Australia. So this is what we want to be able to try and do. And so what the good thing is that what I'm doing is everything is tested in real time. Everything that we do, going to be doing through fashion department, it's been tested, trialed, and run through what I'm doing with the brand, with my designers. So this is something that when I speak to the tutors at the school, when I speak to my old tutors, I'm like, this is how you need to be teaching them. I go, this is what's going to separate. And because what you need, these young designers need to realize as well, is that if you're going to go work for a company, you need to add value to their company. And if you have a specific skill, and it always comes back to skill, I think a lot of these young designers come in, they don't realize. I'm like, you're not going to come into a brand and start designing straight away. No one cares that you're an incredible creative director, this and that. It's like, if you're going into a brand, you need skill. You need to have intense skill. And it's sometimes the skills that you think you have at uni, when you get to industry, they're like 5, 6 levels above. And that was something that when I went to Balmain, they gave me 3 tests as a part of my application. I got a Photoshop test, a hand drawing test, and an Illustrator test. The hand drawing test, he was like, you don't really understand hand drawing for embroidery, because that was the department that I was going into. Because your Photoshop levels are good, but he said, your Illustrator levels were next level. So I walked in there straight away, and they had me working straight away. They knew exactly what I needed to do, and they knew what work to give me. So this is when I started to think, okay, great. This is what we eventually want to be able to scale up to start to partner with brands to be like, right, what are you missing? How can we create something that's going to help people onboard better? Because onboarding is also something that's very expensive in the industry. If I have to sit down and I had one of my juniors, he was working with me, and I had to sit through for half a day working with him on Illustrator to try and get him up to scratch. And I go, one, you should have been taught this in school. You should be at the level that I need you. And he goes, oh, but can you not sit down and work with me? And I'm trying to explain to him, I go, if I'm getting paid 300, say £400 a day, and I need to pay you £150 a day, that's £650 a day that's costing the company to get you and then I'm like, for every day, I go, it's onboarding. And I go, if this is over a whole week, that's £3,000. And it's trying to explain, and I go, it's how can we minimize the cost when it comes to the onboarding process? Because what happens is, especially now, there's a big thing in London where people are just bringing on intern after intern. And it's like, it's good that interns are getting paid now, but from a skills perspective, they're still very limited. And you're seeing this in a lot of the young designers' work that are coming through, and you can tell that it's been made by interns. And it's just like, it's not product that lasts. They're using the limited knowledge that they know. So, and especially with the rise of AI and everything else, is like what we've seen. And I was speaking to a friend of mine who is an app designer, and he was saying, he goes, senior direct and director jobs, they're not going anywhere. Junior and entry level jobs, they're not going anywhere either. All those jobs in between, they're disappearing, because you still need the people at the top to direct things. You need the people at the bottom to kind of do the brunt work, to put things in there. But these people that are trying to go into kind of those mid-level jobs, they're being eaten by technology. And you need to have skill now. People need to have physical skills. So what can you actually add to a company to be able to kind of go into the industry? You can't just be creative anymore. Creativity and talent is 10%. The rest is attitude and skill and the ability to want to learn. So this is something that we're trying to get to motivate people to actually learn, but in an industry manner. I think what is available on the market at the moment, it's not driven by people that are active in the fashion industry. And I think, the way that I look at it as well is looking at education, looking at training. It's like, realistically, it's not sexy. And I think this is the reason why a lot of people haven't approached this in this way, with maybe this level of intensity, is that being the educator and being on the training side, it's not sexy like being the designer. And I saw this when I was working in Paris. We'd be out having a drink after work and everyone's complaining, oh, this and that with work, blah, blah, blah. I hate it. But then the second that someone would come and ask us, oh, what do you guys do? We're fashion designers, we're this, we're that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it would really drive it, and it drive me crazy, because I'm just like, you were all complaining 5 minutes ago how much you hated this. So I've seen it all from a lot of sides, and I think it took me a long time to get to realize, to a point where to kind of say, like, this is the part that I love. The part that's got, I've always been in love with, is the problem solving side of it. I've always been a natural problem solver. And I didn't start fashion. I never touched a sewing machine before the age of 23. But I've always been the person to take things apart, put things together. I used to cut if I didn't like my clothes, I'd cut things off. They'd say, oh, that's wrong. And I'd do things where I'd put double-sided tape and like iron it together, because I realized it would bind the fabrics together, things like that. So I was always quite natural problem solver. So then once I started to learn, pattern cutting, and started to get really intense, I was like, oh, okay, this is like the way I've always looked at kind of pattern cutting and things like this. Like, it's the most extreme version of common sense. It's not that difficult, but once you start to look at the technical side, it's just very extreme versions of like, oh, that makes sense. So that's why I've always loved it, and that's why I've always been so eager to really push myself to learn and do more. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's
Well, I'm an engineer, so I could totally get that side of
yeah. So
it. So,
what
um,
type of engineering? Sorry.
civil engineering,
Oh,
so
okay.
boring kind, really, but it's required. A couple of things that come to mind. One, if you could just talk a bit about what a tech pack is, because it's often bandied around.
Yeah.
The second is, it sounds like there's a big chunk of knowledge missing from the education system, that there's a lot of creativity and sort of high level design, but there's something missing in the technical
Yeah.
and pre-production
Yeah.
knowledge. Because I do hear about people starting brands, and
Mm.
uh, they're communicating with the factories, and it's clear that the factories don't like communicating with people who aren't professional, and
No.
they don't know what they're talking to the factories about, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, so I mean, traditionally a tech pack is a blueprint. It's a blueprint of something to help you, help get your garment over the line. And to a degree, so you do need there are a lot of small things, but you look at someone like a company like River Island, you got to think that They've got teams of designers that are essentially just working behind a desk, and they're putting the tech drawing. Here's the thing, here's the line, it's showing this zip, it's showing that. It's a blueprint of absolutely everything. The problem with that is, and this is what I always say to young designers, I go, when you're looking at big companies, when you're looking at, I guess your Gucci's and your things like the higher end, you need to look at what they physically cannot do. You need to have an element of craft in it. And I always say, I go, the sweet spot for us is 10%. If we can develop and design things in a way and it comes back and put 10% of these kind of craft, hand finished elements, whether it's small cuts, it's small distressing, the sweet spot is 10%. Because you got to think, a lot of these big companies can't do that. Balenciaga were doing it, but they actually created a department specifically to distress things in-house. And that's why it was so expensive. But on a whole, unless they're fully committed to it, they're not doing it. Things are getting sent out, and that's why they come back. It's so polished. Yes, it's made well. They're using the best manufacturers in the world, but it's lost that essence. It's lost that little bit of grit. And I think this is what you get. You get that a lot in London because you had that little bit of grit in things inside that kind of hand thing, and it has just more essence in it. And it's like, that's what I always try to say to people when you really want to separate yourself from big brands. 10% when it comes to craft. But then with the tech pack, things get stale. If you're sending a 50, 60 page tech pack on how to make the garment A to Z, it gets quite stale. But the problem is that these people are visual as well. There's only so much that they're going to skim over things. It doesn't come out perfect. And it's like, and I realize that. I've done it before. I've sent off these big 20, 30 page tech packs, and it doesn't, and I'm like, you didn't read it. Like, oh, sorry, we missed it. Oh, the seamstress missed it. And I'm like, this was a common occurrence. So I've always made a point to when people, I get all these comments, people arguing with me, it's like, you can't manufacture locally, you can't do this and that. And it's like, it's all about understanding how it all works. I go, no two manufacturers are the same. You need to communicate with them completely different. You need to be, I'm at the manufacturers, I reckon between all my manufacturers, maybe about 4 times a week, at least. I'm jotting from all of them back and forth. What they don't realize, and I was lucky coming from a manufacturing background in food, is that the types of people that you're working with and the types of attitudes that you're working with, they're the same. It's old school mentality. People think that they're going to send emails and people are going to get perfectly emails and they're going to get beautiful spreadsheets and stuff back. That don't work. Like I'm sure there are a small percentage of manufacturers that work like that, but most of them are proper old school. You go in there and you got these older Turkish men, you got these old Polish women, they're running around and this idea that they work with their hands. And it's human connection as well. You go in there, you talk to them, you look, this is what I'm doing. I'm looking around. What are you making here? What are you making there? Oh, I didn't realize that you could do that. I'm looking at the machines. But this is a good thing, is like doing the consultancy alongside doing the brand as well. I'm constantly working with other people. So you need to go here. He can do this. He can do that for you. I think people don't spend enough time understanding their manufacturers and just talking to them. And this is when, people say, you can't get low MOQs, this and that. And I go, if people like you, they will help you, but it has to be a back and forth thing. You have, if I have a manufacturer and they be like, oh, yeah, cool, this one here, we only sold 5 units, but yeah, we'll make it for you. But I'm going to make it as easy as possible to get it over the line. I'm going to get all the patterns. I'm going to cut all the patterns out. I'm going to get everything graded myself. I'm going to get everything cut in the studio. I'm going to deliver it all there in bundles, cut up and say, that's small, medium, large, extra large. So then they need to sew. And here's the sample. So it's not so straightforward as people just think low MOQ. There is the difference between what is CMT, so cut, make, trim, and full service. Full service, they'll do everything for you. And there are so many of these manufacturers where they say they will, but they're going to use the cheap zip. They're going to use the cheap lining because they want to, at the end of the day, they're going to save a little bit of money and every little bit helps for them. So you need to understand all these elements and how it works with everyone, how they work with different people to make your process better. And this is what I'm constantly doing. For me, I'm 100% process person, and I am obsessed with knowing how things are made. I hate not knowing how to do things. And that's always been, I guess, in my position now, it's always been my biggest benefit, is that I've never really obsessed over the outside of the brand and everything else and what we can do. So I obsess over process, and I love being able to solve a problem. Like, I'm the first person to jump into it. And it was like, before this, I was working in event management. So I was naturally, that's what you were doing 90% of the time. It's problem solving and thinking on your feet, and you have to think fast. So this is, for me, I'm trying to eliminate as many processes, trying to make the job as a fashion designer less physical as well. It's like, because I look at it as well as, as I get older, my younger sister, she's having a baby in September, and it's like, that she's in Australia. I don't want to be that uncle that's very rarely ever sees a nephew because, oh, I have to work because we've just, we just finished this collection, but now we're going into production, because fashion, it's a ruthless, endless cycle. We're about to finish production for autumn winter, but we've just finished our spring summer collection, which we're going to show in Paris next week. So by the time we get back from Paris, we'll be finishing up production to deliver it for the autumn winter, to jump straight back into production for spring summer. And then also we'll be doing a show in January. So we'll be doing a big collection in January. So I know we'll be doing about 35 to 40 looks. So it's trying to juggle all those things at the same time. And it's like, okay, people always think it's about, you get more people. And this is another thing that brands get wrong as well. They're too quick to hire people. And I think, so I remember seeing an interview with Jeff Bezos, and he goes, it's not about bringing more people in, but it's about building complexity. And I think this is something that isn't really naturally thought about in fashion, is like refining and creating and spending a lot of time on having creative processes to make your output and leave enough room for the creative side. Because essentially what I need to do in my role is, I'm between all the paperwork and looking over the patterns and communicating with the manufacturers. I have a distinct lack of time where I can actually physically create and physically make. So I need to create processes and create methodologies of work. And, right now, just, we're writing up like standardized operating procedures for the brand and how everything works from showroom to production. So I can give them to my designer, so I can give it to my team and be like, right now we're at phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because I need to give myself a lot more time to be able to create. Because right now I'm time poor. So it's not about, and the thing is, it's not about bringing more people in. Because if I bring another person in, it's another person to manage. If I can train my team to the point where they're working at a level that I need them, it's that's even better. And I've seen where the output that we're doing is, I'm turning over between, there's not many people that I reckon in London that'll be able to get leather jackets made in 2 days. That's because the manufacturers like me. They, with a lot of the stuff that we've done, we've done a lot of customs and bits like that. If I go there with a manufacturer and I'm like, right, I've got this deadline, it's specific, it's something that was made to order, they want it quick, here's all the leather, I got it all for you, do you reckon you could get it from me in a couple of days? Not a problem. And it's because I've spent the time with the manufacturers. I sit down, I have a coffee with them, I'll bring them chocolates, things like that. I'll, talk to their staff, and it's like, people don't realize how much that actually helps. It's not just about, big brand, they don't care. And it's like, one of my leather manufacturers, and I rocked up there one day, and he had 12 designers there from Burberry working on one outfit. And he pulled me in, and he goes, why am I arguing with 12 of you who can't get an outfit right? You've been here 4 times now. This boy here drops off patterns, drops off leather, says the tech pack, I'll make a couple of phone calls, and there's no problem. And this is what happens in big brand as well. People think when you go to a big brand, you're going to learn more. But the problem is that your job is so specific that there's no room to learn about the whole business. I'd actually much rather hire someone that has come from a small brand, a series of small brand, even if they don't necessarily have names, and I haven't necessarily heard a lot about them, but you're going to learn 10 times more in a small brand because you're exposed to everything. When you're working in a big brand, and I had this when I was working in Paris, where I felt very stunted. I didn't think I was very good at what I was doing. You know, our job was men's runway, print, and embroidery. So all we were doing were print designs, embroidery designs, but everything was being developed on the computer. So there was a little bit of hand drawing, and you're seeing these other departments, and you're walking through the men's departments and the product development departments, and you're having all these ideas, but that's not your job. Your job is men's, print, and embroidery. And it was so sectioned up, and it did make me realize I'm not built to work in a big brand. Some people are, and that's not a problem. But this is another thing when it comes to the education side. I think everyone has this idea of wanting to work for big brand names, but they're not sure exactly what it entails, especially when it comes to the jobs. People say, oh, I want to design for Rick Owens. It's like, do you know how Rick Owens designs? Not just aesthetically, but how their team works internally. What skills do you actually need to have? What department do you want to go into? Because there's men's outerwear, men's jersey, there'll be a print department, there'll be, it's so specific. And I saw this when I was in Paris, and I spoke to, he was the head of outerwear at Balmain there at the time. And right now, this guy here, I think he's the head of design at Amiri, and you can see like the level of intricacy that he's kind of brought into that company with the garments. It's like, oh, I know that's Daniel. But he said to me, he goes, if you want to be an outerwear designer, your final collection at uni needs to be outerwear heavy. I went back to uni, the university, the tutors, they go, no, it needs to be balanced. You need to be able to show range. But when you're showing range as well, it also shows that you don't have focus. Because then I actually it was like 6 months after that, and had a job interview with Burberry, where everything that I was doing before this, I was like 100% outerwear. I had a job interview with Burberry. They looked at my collection. They go, oh, there's not a lot of outerwear development, is there? And I'm coming back to this conversation that I'd had with the designer in Paris, coming back to my tutor in London, and then it's like, they don't education, and a lot of these people who are teaching, they don't fully understand the ins and outs and how a company is actually built up. What does a product developer actually do? What does a designer and a runway team do? How do they communicate with the print team, the embroidery team? And this is something that's lost as well, is that because people don't fully understand the ins and outs of how a brand works and how the designers and the teams are sectioned off, they lose focus. They don't have enough focus. But then as well, another problem that they do is they don't instill enough education into what they actually do, but they kind of lead everyone to believe that you want to be the creative director, and anything beyond that, or being a senior designer or being a big designer in these departments, it's not worth it. So when I talked about kind of these job roles like product developer and things like that being thrown around, they're kind of frowned upon. And I had another instance where in my final year at uni, I actually won a competition with representing the school for Burberry design competition. And I met with he was the director of men's product development there. And I didn't really fully understand what a product developer actually did at the time for a fashion brand. But you realize now they're the people that make all the money. They're the people that develop everything that actually sell. The runway team, they're doing the big fun pieces, but those are the first teams they're the first people to lose all their jobs. Those teams don't consist of a lot of people. The product developers, because if you actually know how to design and develop a product that actually sells, you're worth more to a company and you're harder to get rid of. But how it's seen from an education perspective, it's like these people are saying, nah, that's just a developer. That's just a developer. It's frowned upon. So there's not a lot of education into like what actual jobs there are within the structure of a giant company. So this is what's happened. A lot of people are coming out and they're applying for all these random jobs. And we all did it. God knows how many hundreds and God knows thousands of jobs that we applied for through LinkedIn and trying to, but there's no focus in anyone's work, and it's getting worse. We still had, when I was studying, a lot more support and were pushed to work technically a lot more to a degree. Whereas now you're having a lot of work that is, you're having the odd few come through, and these people that do become obsessed with this skill, but it's not a lot, and it's a leading to a lot of unemployment, a lot of dissatisfaction after graduating from fashion school, and it's across the board. And it's a people look at UAL when it comes to the St. Martins and the graduates and this and that, but no one ever comes back to talking to them 5 years later and see where they actually are in the industry. Because what happens is, Selfridges and Harrods every month, every June, they're licking their lips and they're because I'm like, oh, we got a new bunch of sales assistants coming through. And that's
Well,
because,
I do hear about a lot of fresh students coming out and just sitting at places like Boohoo, making tech packs, sending
yeah.
it off to China or Malaysia or whatever.
Mm,
Probably wasn't sort of very aligned with the romance of the fashion world that
exactly.
they were thinking of when they started.
Exactly. And you're sold this dream, and you're sold this dream of how you're going to work. And I mean, I'm very fortunate to work in the job that I do, that I have. But I guess, like I say to people, I go, you haven't seen the back end of it. The exhaustion, the dragging suitcases constantly around London, up and down stairs, and I'm like, it doesn't stop. If anything, it gets worse because, well, now we can afford to get the fabric delivered, but then they're still going to go make me lug it up three flights of stairs because we've got 600 meters of fabric sitting at the bottom. Um, so there still are these things, and it's like I always tell people, I go, fashion design should come with, especially in a small brand, should come with a fitness requirement. Um, it keeps you on your toes, and I think what I love about it is that it's making me use every aspect of my brain. There's there's maths, there's problem solving. You're using the creative side of it. How I've got the logistics side where I'm trying to bring everything together. Okay, I've got a hand woven fabric that's coming from India, but I want to get it made in the UK. But my natural dyer, she's in Glasgow. How can I make this all work? Which part needs to change? Because it's just not feasible when you've got so many parts. And it's this idea of sustainability within an industry as well. And I'm like, if you're making a product, it's not sustainable because your zips have probably gone from China to the retailer in London. Now they're coming back to you, and then it's a product that's getting sent over to Italy, and it's like everything just travels so much. I don't fully believe in. I think the only form that we can do, the best thing that we can do as designers, when I talk about this thing, when it comes to like low MOQ and keeping your stock small, because you don't want to be sitting on stock. And I have arguments with people all the time, but it's like, yes, if you're making five things and you're paying a surcharge and you're making a smaller margin on it, it's still better than sitting on stock because stock is dead money. And then you need to pay to store it as well. And if you've got 20 boxes stored up in the back of your studio, that you could be using that space to build your team, to be able to build your workspace. It's like people don't realize, like, you don't want to be sitting on stock is the worst thing that you can do if you can't move it. Because what happens in the end, once you do 2, 3 collections and that stock builds up, builds up, builds up, a lot of it ends up in landfill. So it doesn't matter if it's made out of biodegradable organic cotton because you're still gonna have garment tags, you're still gonna have threads, you're still gonna have unnatural elements that go into it. So the only real form is like you got bespoke and upcycling. They're your only two true forms of sustainability within the fashion industry. Everything else is just greenwashing and a bit of a cop out, and it's buzzwords that people attach to their brands.
Yeah. So, at what point does the dead stock just sitting there? At what point is it the most viable thing to do to just throw it away?
It's when you've just got too much of it. And it's, everyone is urged, and this is the hard thing with fashion, is that You think of a lot of other industries where, okay, you're thinking of tech now. Okay, if I'm looking at tech and you're thinking of someone like Apple, okay, you've got God knows how many hundreds of thousands of people working for that company, and they're developing a new iPhone every couple of years. But then you've got a team of four people expected to develop 50 to 100 new items every 6 months and expected to be at a standard. It's like the pressure that's put on creators and designers, it's quite a lot. Like it's difficult and it's not feasible and it's not sustainable in the long term. And it's like, this is what I look at fashion department as well, where I'm like, I love what I do, but I don't want it to ever push me to a point where I don't love it anymore. And you have to look at yourself in the future and be like, where do you want to be? What do you want to do? And it's like, I want to be able to have something to use as a support. And I think when I was, and I think, this kind of tackles something else where it's, all the gatekeeping in the industry as well, where people don't like to share information. And the longer I'm in it, I understand it to a degree because there's a lot of arrogance and there's a lot of egos. And, if I've spent years working in a relationship with someone, I don't want to pass the information on to someone that's going to tarnish that, if that's going to reflect badly on me. So with Fashion Partner, what I wanted to do is like, how can I do that to kind of protect myself, but to protect the people that I'm working with as well? And ultimately, it comes down to training and education and educating people to work the same way I do, to be able to communicate with these people to get the most effective product as well. So I'm talking now with one of my manufacturers here in London, and he was saying he is having this problem with new people coming in not being able to communicate properly. And I go, right, let's test it. Let's build a course where we get people to come in. We built a methodology of how to work with you. We give it to them. We build it. We do, we have videos, we have written notes, everything. We go over it with a fine tooth comb, everything top to bottom, paid class, everything. But at the end of it, you're actually working in a manufacturing facility that you can go straight to. I've already shown you what machines are there, what you can make, what you can't make, and actually being able to ready to be like, okay, cool, I can start now. So it's changing how learning and training is delivered. And it's like, this is what I've been trying to work with. Once we build this up more, I want to start working with the university. So this is something that we need to, you need to be offering your students. It's like, unfortunately, what the other side of it is that I think people expect a lot for free as well. And I think this is a difficult thing where and it's like, I wish I could, but, I live in one of the most expensive cities in the world. And so I'm trying to build something. So I'm trying to build, a business as well, because at the end of the day, everyone's got bills and everyone's got to eat. And this is what we're doing with the manufacturers as well. It's like, let's build something that we can all work together, that we're all working to build a better ecosystem where, because, a lot of local manufacturing is disappearing, unfortunately. And this guy that I'm going to be working with, he's probably one of the only ones who owns a manufacturing, and he's in his early 40s. And everyone else is like, I've got one manufacturer. I love him to bits. He's my leather manufacturer, but he's 88 years old. And yeah. And he's still there in the studio 6 days a week. And he's cutting up materials, and he's like, come here, come in, need you, and it's incredible to see. Like, I love going to see him, but you're like, damn, there's not a lot of these, like, there's not a lot of younger blood in the industry, especially on the manufacturing front. And it's like, if people don't start supporting local manufacturing and stop having putting a stigma on the making side of it as well, because like I said, the making side isn't the sexy side. It's being the designer and having the brand. We need to shift that thought process away, because or else local manufacturing is going to die. And then you're going to have to go to Asia. You're going to have to go abroad. And in saying that, I just came back from China a couple of weeks ago, and there's such a massive misconception with how they work and conditions and things like that. I've never seen something so chaotic, so clean and tidy and professional, and it looks like chaos, but it runs like such a well-oiled machine. There is something there to work for everyone, but you need to understand how it works. And that was what I saw when people tell me, oh, that you go to China when you need to do hundreds of units. Like, I went to a factory of sample rooms. I went to this giant factory where every little store was their own business and people specialized in different things. It's like, and they didn't want to do more than 2, 3 things. And it was like, and they had the full setup. They'd have 10, 20 machines per thing, and they could do everything. And the quality, like I've never seen before. I'll do a lot of sample development and shape development there. And the speed, the communication, the quality, and I'm talking with people that don't even speak the same language as me. And they're putting things in translator and stuff. And I'm just like, this is when people need to work on the communication skills and just being a little bit more inventive and having a little bit of foresight with how they work. I think people get locked in to just thinking two dimensionally. It's like, I got another friend of mine, the way that he works, and I'm like, okay, you're manufacturing in India, but why are you working in this manner when you need to send things over physically? I go, if you sent things over digitally, if you changed this process and put that into your company and spent a little bit of time developing your process, you'll save so much time and money in the long run. Because people, when they talk about sustainability, but no one ever looks at financial sustainability and longevity in the industry as well. Because I'm like, no one's thinking of people as well. People are putting the environment and animals and everything else first, but people are forgetting about people and the conditions of people locally. People are so quick to jump down, jump abroad and say, oh, sweatshops in China, this and that. I saw none of that. And, there are so many of them are working to these really specific, they've got their certifications. They've got like perfect, incredible working conditions. But I'm like, I'm sorry, I go, but you're talking about the conditions here and there. And, Stella McCartney's a perfect example. I love animals. I love this. I love that. But I know for a fact of how her people in-house are treated. I know that she's having people drop off left, right, and center. A lot of brands that this is happening to, they're so quick to talk about the problems in the world from a political position to have
Yeah.
them seen in a specific light. But I'm like, how are you treating the people internally? You're so quick to fire people and you're having people quit because of the conditions. It's like you're having people quit because they can't handle the workloads because you've sacked half their team to save money. But now this poor person is working from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. every night because they're being sold a dream and people feel like they get stuck. So I'm like, when is the narrative going to shift and start looking at it? So how can we change things to make things more better for the people that we're working with? And I make a point of that with the guys that I work with at the brand. And I said, I go, start at 10, we finish at 6. I usually get there earlier, finish at 5. When it comes to fashion week and we need to do those few later nights and stuff like that, that's normal. That's when it comes to the event side. But I don't want it to be the normal. I don't want it to be that this is their whole life. And I think people in the industry are trained to believe that you work for this brand, it's your whole life. It's not. It's not. You've got families, you've got to enjoy yourself. People who have these other side projects and bits that they're working on, you've got to leave room for that other type of creativity and, those other things. It's not the be all or end all. At the end of the day, we just make clothes. And I think that was one of the best things that my manager, when I worked in Paris, and I saw that, and he was very senior, and everyone was arguing and moaning and yelling at each other, and he just comes in and he just goes, "You just all need to calm down." He goes, "We just make clothes. We're not doctors. We're not special. We just
Mm.
make clothes." And I think that's something that I always try to be, because it comes from, those things come from the top. If you've got the person at the top acting in a specific way, it's going to trickle down. So I've always tried to make sure that how I'm working, how I'm talking to people, it's like, I'm not special. Nothing what we do. So yes, we're very privileged to be able to do what we do. And, I do consider myself very lucky to be able to get up and do something that I love. But, ultimately, we're not changing the world. But at the end of the day, I want to try and change the industry for the better to try and make it easier for these next people coming through, try and retrain them to think a little bit more analytical, a little bit more process driven. And it's not to make them stale in their creative output, it's to leave more room for the creative output. If you can tidy the rest of that mess up, you can leave so much more room in people's brains to think creatively if everything else is in order. And, that's probably the one thing is like, I wish I could work the way that I am now from when I started, because my archive, the way that I'd be able to kind of reference back and, my work and things like that, it would be bigger than some brands now. And I'm like, oh, if we can get people working in this manner from the beginning to get them to really understand these types of processes. Like when we got told at uni and they were saying like, oh, just sample things. We didn't really understand what the idea of, I want to test this and this, just sample it. And it was words that used to get thrown around to us all the time. But I didn't really understand. I'm like, oh, what, never really understood what that meant. So now it's like you see on the fashion department where I've got a lot of these little samples where I've made pockets, textile samples, and I work specifically in that way. That's how I work across everything. When I get a material, sometimes I don't know, but some people are like, oh, that's a coat, that's a jacket, that's a dress. It's like, no, I need to put it under the machine to understand what it can do. Once I start playing with it, then I'm going to understand what the fabric can actually, then I'm going to understand what it needs to be. I'm going to understand how it needs to be constructed. I'm going to understand what it needs, if it needs a lining, what weight lining, what type of lining. People need to spend more time understanding the materials and playing with them. Okay, you need to leave more room for play. And that, I think, comes into something where it's like, leaving more room for mistake. I think people are scared to make mistakes now, and that has to do with the speed of what the output of the industry is asking for. So what I want to do is try and tidy up that entire backside of it, all those other bits of it, to allow room for mistakes, and then having outcome, and being able to have people who are trained on how to approach those mistakes when they because that's how you learn, So
Yeah.
so that's it. People just aren't leaving enough room for mistakes, and especially at uni. If you should not be making perfectly made and finished garments at uni. I'm more intrigued to see someone's mistakes and someone's development and how you overcome your mistakes, rather than perfectly made jackets and things like that. If I want a perfectly made jacket, you go to Selfridges, you see millions of them. You go to Zara, you see millions of them. Like, I shouldn't be saying, unless someone is coming into uni and they've got years and years of experience in making. But I'm like, but still at that stage, you need to be using your time at university to go and make more mistakes to push yourself further. That's what it's for. Development. Like, you need to and being able to kind of display your development and show it and learn from it.
I noticed you were talking about how many new styles you make for each season, say 40 or 50,
Mm.
and also then how much gets sitting in boxes at then, which you can't get rid of.
Yeah.
Not you specifically, but sort of in general. I mean, do we need 40, 50 new styles per season? Or
We
how
got
do you know that how many are viable?
The thing is, I mean, obviously it comes down to the brand, and it comes down to your selling, how you're selling as well. It's like, I would love to be able to come into a collection and say like, hey, we got 10 items. That's it. But then you've got the pressure from the buyers who are looking for a range to be able to curate a story. And it's like there's no one single answer for it. And it's like, but then if you're selling direct to consumer, you can have four items, and you can be selling them in rotation and slowly iterating them. But it's just because then if you want to do a runway, you want to do a show, it's like, that's a huge investment. But you got to have the product as well to be able to kind of display to make it worthwhile. And you got to have a balance of your commercial entry-level items, your mid-range items, your outerwear, your show pieces, lengths, collars, this and that, materials, showing you different forms of construction, but making sure it's all cohesive. Like, it's an endless battle that you're really having. It's like, we are doing this because we're working in a specific way. We're working in a traditional way, in a sense, because if you want to work on that kind of higher end fashion brand, you need to stick to calendars to a degree, because ultimately you're working towards buying windows. And yeah, it happens all the time where people skip collections, and what's nice, it's becoming more common now where people will just say, no, I'm skipping spring summer, I'm doing only carryovers, and I want to refocus for autumn winter, which is nice. I think that needs to become more the norm. But then the problem of that is cash flow,
Yeah.
because realistically, as a brand, unless you're doing a lot of customs, and unless you're selling a lot direct to consumer, realistically, you're only making money once every 6 months. So you need to iterate, and develop what, your collections and your items to kind of fit that season, because you want to be able to sell it, because you need to make more money. Because I think people forget that, there's this idea of when people say, I want a brand, I don't want to focus on the commerce, I want it to be, artistic and creative. It isn't fashion, it's art. It's a crap, realistically.
Yeah.
It's People don't spend enough time understanding their client. It's funny when you're at uni and they tell you, oh, do a customer profile. And it's funny, everyone's work looks completely different, but everyone's customer profile is exactly the same. It's, oh, my client, he lives in, or they live in a metropolitan city like New York, LA, London, Paris, Milan. They work in a senior art director type role, potentially in advertising, because they're the ones that make money. And they would like to curate a wardrobe, because, and smaller, more unknown, avant-garde type brands. Like, this person is the 0.001% of the kind. They exist, but you can't all be catering to it. And I think it should be down to the education, like within education, to be like, no, I think what you're developing is someone that is 40 to 50 years old. There's not a problem with that. Some people aren't made to be some people can't think designing for a higher end market, and that's okay as well. And I think what needs to happen is that there needs to be this narrative shift of, these jobs are okay, there's nothing wrong with them. Going to design for Zara, it's not a bad thing. You're going to go work there and get treated like royalty as well. you know there are perks of working like that, because the way that they work at speed is interesting. They can go from sketch to shop floor in like 2 to 3 weeks. No one else can do that. The whole industry almost had to change because of that. I think there has been this shift coming back of people, obviously, shopping and having brand loyalty and things like that. But, for a minute there, people, everyone was scared. Burberry, Tom Ford, they were trying to change their models to see now, buy now. So they were producing and selling directly after the collections. But then the problem that they had with that, there was nothing to be able to gauge how the industry and how buyers were reacting to these items. It's like, you can't have a design team select what people are going to sell. And I think this is something that, when I was doing a project with Burberry's, was years ago, and the first thing that I did was I went into all the stores in London and I spoke to the staff and the sales managers. And I start to put together a bit of a report. I went back to the design director I was working with, and he goes, "Oh, it's really interesting. We never saw this type of information." It's like, "Where did you see this?" And I'm like, "Well, I spoke to the sales staff. They're the people who are interacting with the client." So, did you know your client does X, Y, Z? I had no idea. This is one of the most senior people at Burberry. I'm talking to sales staff. And he goes, "What made you think to do that?" And I go, "Well, at the time, I was working as sales staff at Doc Martens. And we see how people used to pick up the boots, look at them, try them on. You see the face that they pull. It's like, oh, they're uncomfortable. Oh, there's too many laces on them." Design team doesn't know that. The
No.
people who are on the floor, and there's not enough interaction with the shop floor. The one company who does do it, I think, is All Saints. All Saints Boxing Day sales, they actually make their entire design, like head office team, work in the store to understand the client. And I think this is something that needs to happen more, is I don't think there's enough interaction. I think this is something that really should happen a lot more with the retailers as well, to get designers to better understand who they're selling to. And I think there isn't enough focus on this as well. There isn't enough energy put into this. There's too much energy put into the design side. But I mean, without, obviously I'm in the showrooms and things like that. I need to interact. I need to interact with the buyers to see not just what they're buying, but how they're interacting with it, how they're looking at it, how are they feeling it, what are they doing when they put it on? If the pockets are too high, it's like, do they really need to lift their elbows? Oh, okay, let's drop. Okay, when we go into production, let's drop the pockets 2 centimeters. But you need a flag with them. It's like, so these are the things. It's all about how people interact with the clothing as well. When I was at Levi's and I was a tailor there, and I never forget they'd done a jacket where, on the denim jackets, how you got the pocket bag actually becomes an extra pocket on the inside.
Yeah.
They'd raised the pocket, the bottom of the pocket bag, so it went the whole way through, and it was a beautiful jacket. But you know how many guys went and got their phones, went to put it on the inside and fell through, and they put it back down. They're like, two less pockets. Nah,
Yeah.
because it's all about, and I'm like, they should know. And we had someone from the design team come in, and they're like, oh, they're not that selling. What? And I'm like, I'm sitting right here next to them. I go, everyone's dropping their phones. I go, you drop the pockets back down. I go, you got a beautiful jacket. And I'm like, you can't do that. Then there was another one they did with a women's one where they tried to put a pocket into a side seam, but it was too far back. And it was too annoying to get your hand in. And people don't think enough about these really small little details. And it's like, I first saw this when I was studying in Melbourne, in Australia. And my first year of fashion, women's wear was compulsory because the techniques in pattern cutting are much more difficult, dart manipulation, things like that, blah, blah, blah. And one of the first things we made was a dress with pockets. I'm a boy, we got pockets in everything. We're spoiled. We got a jacket,
Yep.
it's got 10 pockets in it. You forget that women don't really have clothing with pockets in it. Now there's a bit of a shift, and all these girls and everyone's getting excited because, oh my God, a pocket with dresses, a dress with pockets, a dress with pockets. And we were just making the samples in calico and muslin, but all the girls were asking, can I bring in my own fabric and make it in my dress because I want to wear it? Or can I adjust this so it's in my size? So some of the girls were redoing the pattern so it fit them. And I was just like, oh, I didn't realize you get so excited about pockets. And it just made me and these are the kind of the little things where people can really, like, bringing back even interaction with clothing. And I think especially women's wear has lost a lot of that because you don't have the things where you put your pocket, like put things in the pockets. Men's wear, we've probably been a little bit more spoiled, where I'm like, I know my sunglasses go in that pocket. I know my keys go in that pocket. I know my wallet goes in that pocket. And that's why you probably see men and people wearing men's clothing naturally hold on to clothing a lot longer. I saw this when I was working at Levi's as well. It was never women's jeans and things like that you were repairing, crutch repair over crutch repair. I remember we had a pair of jeans come in from Bill Nye, and I go, just give him a new pair of jeans at this point. He goes, no, he loves them. The whole inside of the leg was completely destroyed. He goes, no, 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 we have to repair them. Everything is perfect the way it fits. This is what the PR people do. He goes, no, he said everything, just he likes the way that the pockets feel now because they're broken in. He goes, his wallet fits perfectly in the pocket, and you can see the outline. And I go, people have a lot more if you can kind of instill a lot more of that interaction into a garment, people are going to build relationship with clothing as well. When I'm designing as well, I'll put the little buttons and things and think on the inside that can completely change how something sits on the body, the length, the size, things like that, because it gives it a little bit more interaction. Because a bigger jacket with a specific pair of trousers might work, but then if I have a slimmer pair of trousers and I want to cinch it in a little bit further, but if I have that ability to be able to do it, I'm giving a garment more life. If you give a garment more life, that is what should feed into sustainability as well. Because you're not just building something for a specific occasion. You're building and you're developing something that can work across multiple areas of your life as well. So I think that's something else that really needs to be looked at when it comes to sustainability as well. It's like the life cycle of your clothing and how much life that you can instill into your clothing.
Something that bothers me about the sustainability bit is that we'll buy clothes that will work for many situations, many usages, and they're super well made. They'll last forever.
Mm,
But then the cycle turns again, and there's more new stuff.
mm,
It's super tempting, which really fills the same role as is equally well made.
mm.
So at some point, a guy like me will have trousers enough for the next 200 years, and they're all brilliant.
Yeah.
Is that a fashion problem, or is it a me problem, or is it a
I think
consumerism problem?
I think it's a consumerism problem, and it's like, especially now. I mean, you're just so drawn to seeing new, and I mean, the only clothing I really purchase are, well, socks, t-shirts from Uniqlo, t-shirts and vests from Uniqlo, and that's it. Obviously, I'm in a position where I wear all our old samples, and then like the power of being able to alter things, to being able to go and buy like a vintage pair of jeans and be like, oh, right, I can just take them home and taper them. Oh, they're a bit big in the waist, I can do that myself. It's just the way that the industry is right now. I think the way that everyone is, people are just scrolling and it's just new, 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 new. And I think it's just that, I think people are looking for that constant dopamine kick as well. And it's like, that's what it is. And it's like people spend and purchase new things. So don't get me wrong. It's like, I do it as well in different ways. I love to invest in my work, sometimes a little bit, maybe an unhealthy amount, but the thing is, everyone's got their thing. It's like I tell my girlfriend as well, and I'm like, hey, it could be worse. But I get obsessive over process, over how things are done. I'm constantly getting manufacturers and things come to me, and I'm like, right, you say you can do all these things, let's test it. And I'm always testing new garments and styles. And so we found this incredible pattern cutter in China. And he showed me some of the work that he'd done. I'm like, okay, let's push him. And I go, I'm going to push you in a really difficult way, though. I'm going to send you a picture of something. I'm going to send you very basic measurements, but it's going to have incredible details on it. I want to see I want to see what it comes out like. And I've done it a few times, and I've been progressively getting a little bit more difficult and difficult. And for me, it's like, okay, I'm not necessarily spending on clothes that I would wear, but I'm spending on things. It's like, I've got an archive of, in my archive, in my studio, I've probably got about 150 different garment shapes, garment types and shapes, where I'll be like, that's a really cool, like Montclair jacket. I need that shape. That's a really cool Rick Owens jacket. I need that shape. I've become obsessed with silhouettes. And this comes back to when I was saying I'm getting better, final garments 90% of the time, first time, because I've been investing in shapes. If I have a garment comes to someone says, oh, I want to do this type of garment, I've got the shape for it already. Because then I'm only altering shapes and adding my details rather than developing from scratch. So I can develop much faster because I've invested in clothing as a tool rather than something that I'm going to wear. And I think this is something that designers don't do either, is that they're so quick to just get their garment block. And it's like, this was interesting where I was like, we all come out of university and we all left with a shirt block, a jacket block, a trouser block, and a t-shirt block to be able to work with. We're all you've got 500 kids all working with the same 4 initial garment blocks. There's no form of variety. And I go, you look at a school somewhere like IFM where they've got incredible resources and you've got these beautiful fits and silhouettes because they've got better resources to work with. And this is what I come back to saying. I go, putting that footwork in and having my endless resource of all these shapes to work from it frees up so much time. And I have the ability to jump into final garments immediately because I already have the physical sample, which is a perfectly made jacket, to just alter. And because I understand the materials and I understand, I touch and I feel things and I'm sampling, it's like, so this is when it all comes back into process. It's like, how can I eliminate jobs to leave more room for creativity to get a result faster? And then people are talking about Clo 3D and things like that. I'm like, if it was as good as people think it is, every single brand in the world would be using it. I've tested it. I've tried to use it abroad with manufacturers. When it comes to like the stress maps and things like that, I just don't believe. I think there's a place for it. I always tell people, if you want to use it, you need to become engineer level on it. You need to live and breathe it. When I was in India and I was there with a manufacturer, and he showed me all these avatar 3D models that this designer had sent to him. And he goes, "Oh, look, Anthony, you should work like this." He goes, he sends me this 3D avatar. This is the dress. It's really cool. It's got all these pieces. They made the first sample. I've never seen something more ill-fitting in my life. I have never seen anything more ill-fitting. And I'm like, you've got the bust, which is like down here. The waist is like this far away from the bust. I'm like, this doesn't make things were just like, you had like, they tried to put it on the mannequin, they physically couldn't. He goes, they actually need to redevelop it completely from scratch. And I'm like, yes, there's things if you want to have, but I'm like, yeah, it can work, but you still need a degree of physicality to it. At the end of the day, I don't think something that is worn so close to the body can ever fully be made on a digital platform. It's like, it does, because when you're having, it goes back to the thing when I was talking about the pockets being a little bit too high up. So you can't need to lift your elbows up. I go, you can't gauge those small centimeters and millimeters on a screen. You need to, if you need to invest in your fits, how things work, and you need to kind of develop from there. And this is when people say, "Oh, what advice would you give young designers?" I don't want to give anyone advice if I don't understand how they work, what they can and can't do. And I go, it's not really my place to without really understanding how they work, what they want to do, because realistically, no two brands are the same. If you're looking at everyone's background and situations, financial capabilities, and things like that, how much time you actually have to invest, it's like there isn't a way to really gauge it unless you're working one-to-one. And it's like, yeah, I'd love to be able to invest that kind of time in working with people, but this is why I wanted to build FDL, because it's like, if we can eventually make something that is an entire resource, which becomes an ecosystem of people to take and pick apart these types of resources and use it in their own way in a more cost-effective manner than sitting down with me for, £100 an hour to be able to tell you these things. Because this is what I kind of thought it was. Well, it's like, oh, when you have consultancy, if you're sitting down with someone, realistically, you're just leaving with homework. But how many times do you work with a consultant who has the resources ready available to be like, right, let's curate you a program with all the tools that we already have. Now you can take it away and use it as you will. I'm here if you have any questions. But my goal is to make sure that you become independent and not dependent on me. Because then I'm not going to feel right taking all your money. Because you're not going to get anything out of it realistically. It's just me doing things for you rather than you actually learning. Teach them how to fish.
It sounded like the guys in India doing the 3D stuff shouldn't have ordered their avatars from the Lara Croft selection.
Exactly. And the funny thing was, the designer was from here in London, and he goes, okay, he thought, okay, I'm digitizing my pattern. So he had the right idea where he goes, if I work in this manner, I can send 3D avatars and everything abroad. The digital patterns from Clo could be exported as DXF or Illustrator or PDF. You're sending them abroad, so that's another cost you don't have to think about because you're not physically sending paper patterns. He just didn't have the right amount of skills to be able to kind of back it up. It's like, So the good thing is like it does solve a few problems, but this is why I use Illustrator as well, because I've got my studio of the physical garments. I can note down and write all my alterations. And then I've done it before where I've been in Australia with my family, and I'm sitting there on my laptop making patterns, sending them off to this manufacturer to start sampling this and that, because I can do it from anywhere. I've it, and it is, that's the thing. Chloe was probably the first thing to actually try and focus to make that more, to take away that kind of traditional role where a pattern cutter is working over a table. I still think if you're learning pattern cutting, you do need to learn it with paper. You do need to learn in 3D in real before you go and learn these other softwares and learning to kind of develop, because it's like, I think it is very important to go through that process of understanding why it was difficult and why I changed the way that I work to make my job easier, but also make, I didn't want the saw back anymore.
I mean, I guess as long as the fabric is two-dimensional,
Hmm.
paper makes more sense, unless you're doing 3D knitting.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
sort of working in 3D with a 2D material.
I think it's really good. Like, I think I'm getting your head around that. How is this shape going to move around the body? And everyone does this. Like, you walk around a studio and everyone goes, they'll go like this, and they're like, and they start to do this. It's like, okay, it's got to go like that. It's got to go like. And it's like, I think it's important because it's like once you're looking at a giant piece of paper that's spread out in front of you, and you're looking at all these lines, and you're looking at these slopes and shoulders, and how you can change and alter things ever so slightly, but it makes such a dramatic change on the body. I think it's a necessary pain. It's a necessary pain that people that want to learn that need to learn that way. You need to learn that way before you can kind of jump into anything else. I don't believe you should learn, like, I think people think it's a shortcut to, oh, I'm just going to learn how to pattern cut on clo. No. I've seen people just, oh, I'm going to trace this trouser shape and then stick it together and stick it on the avatar. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that, because it's a matter of centimeters. When you're working on the rise and the seat of a pair of trousers, you need to know how it works. You need to know how it joins through the middle, how lines are flowing through. Like, you need to understand your seam allowances. You need to understand bulk distribution. And it is, it goes back to even the thing where you see, sure, you've seen that video with Rick Owens. It's like, you need to make clothes. You need to make mistakes. And you can't be scared to make mistakes. It's like you need to be comfortable with making mistakes, because the amount of times we have a jacket of the new collection, which we made the rib collar too tall, and that actually created something really nice. But it was because we jumped ahead and it completely changed the design. And it's like, you can't be scared to make those mistakes. Like, even now, happens all the time. I always say, like, if it's something that I'm not sure of, and I'll be like 90% of the design, I'll be like, I've got the fabric, I've got the shape, I know what I want it to do. I need to sit down at the machine, and there will be a few times where I need to make things entirely myself instead of getting someone else to do it, whether it's a seamstress or one of the other designers or manufacturer. Because I'm like, only me sitting down with this fabric, I can make it better. Like, no amount of drawing and iteration. And a lot of it, so the amount I've had designs completely change through the making process. And this is when I go back and lean on my skills and what I learned when I was at Levi's, where so many of these little tricks and things in between, we're just adding little bits of fabric and say, how can I cut things and how can I make this look seamless? And it's like, hand sewing became my best friend. It taught me how to hide a lot of my mistakes. It taught me how to be able to just, it taught me a completely different way of working. But that's it. It's being able to kind of know when to jump in and be like, okay, I need to actually physically make this myself to understand what it can do. And 9 times out of 10, it does become something like much more interesting. So we had a piece that the piece went out. So we ended up, it was like a first sample that we did. We ended up painting in silicone, and it was Timothy Chalamet ended up wearing it. And the bolt, the mechanism on the inside, where we made the belt internal, because I'm like, well, I want I don't want it to be a traditional bomber jacket. I don't want it to have any elastic in it. I want to have an internal belt that's invisible, that can be hidden, to be able to be altered on different shapes, because we wanted to be able to zip it the whole way up and be able to cinch it up seamlessly and have it all hidden, to be able to put it on a female or someone smaller. Then we wanted to be able to kind of have those kind of interchangeable, playable elements that gives a garment more life. So this is the only way that I was kind of able to get to this point was just by making. And I've made, I don't even know how many things I've made, but it was always this thing was between like my study in Australia to London, because I'd done a full year studying in Australia and we finished in December, and I'd found out it was the beginning of the following year that I'd gotten into London. So I had, from basically November in 2015 to September 2016, where I had a gap in between. But at this point, I was like so eager to get back into it. So, and I was still seeing all the work from my friends who were still studying in Melbourne, and they'd nearly finished their second year by the time I was starting my first year again. So I'm like, I went and got a bunch of old books, tried to figure out what they do. I made a whole bunch of garments that didn't really make sense, but I learned things. Like I taught myself how to line a jacket, and I'm like the concept of pulling something through, and I made a half line jacket, and I managed to figure out how to pull it through. Then I slowly, progressively made things more difficult. And it turns out the way I was doing it was wrong, but it actually completely changed the way that I work, and it completely opened up like different ways of working and being able to understand what I could do and the importance of all the, just different types of seams and finishes and how it actually came together. So that was a very important stage for me. Between, I guess, my education was, I had like, 6, 8 months, 9 months just to mess around and find out, really. I allowed myself that time to make mistakes, because it wasn't the be all or end all. And I think this is what people need to do when they're at university. You need to make mistakes. I don't like that you have a shirt project or something like that goes over 3 months. The collection that we just designed that we're going to sell in the showrooms next week, me and one of the other guys basically designed it in 4 days. We had all the fabrics there. We had an idea what we wanted to do, but the final designs and design development happened in about 4 days. And I'm like, you shouldn't be there needs to be something that needs to filter into this. The structure of all this needs to be quicker without, throwing them into the deep end. And allow them more time to mess up. And I think there was always too much focus on drawing. Teachers come in and say, I want to see 50 new drawings. Waste of time. Better off saying, I want you to come in with 2 or 3 12s. Make stuff based on your concept and things. It's like, I want to see samples. I want to see different types of seams. I want to see different types of finishes. Don't draw. If you've got supporting sketches, yes, because that's what we do all the time. You have supporting sketches to draw through an idea, create a blueprint, then you make it. And it's make. I've got boxes at the studio there. Between my studio and then the other studio, we've just got endless amount of samples everywhere. And I always say, don't throw them away. We'll refer back to this. And then something will pop up and I'm like, this has come from there. This is something we'd done 2-3 years ago. And it's happened quite a lot. I remember there was a sample that I'd done for this project for Burberry 5-6 years ago, and I had it in a box. And we did a video on it on the fashion department page, and I think it got up to something like 20,000 likes or something. And it was just like, and the idea of it actually came from a student not knowing how to make a buttonhole. So I saw him cut a shape. He cut a circle because he goes, well, the circle's going to go in there and kind of latch on. And I'm like,
Yeah.
cool idea. But I'm like, how can you? So this is as well. It's like, even I really like working with people who don't have a lot of experience as well, because watching the way that they do, so sometimes it's really interesting, the mistakes that they make and seeing what you can take. And it's happened quite a lot where I've had students who kind of come in and be like, how are you going to do this? Because obviously, if I'm doing it, I know how it should be done and I know how I can design and develop it. But sometimes having people in there and having people around you that don't really have much of an idea and using them in a way that can kind of help create something that shouldn't exist in a way. And
Which
it's
is like
like,
which is like music.
exactly.
You don't want to be Dire Straits.
Yeah, you don't, and you don't. And I think this was something that I saw in China as well. It's like the manufacturing, the making, everything that I saw there was incredible. Perfect finishing, perfect techniques. But what it lacked was that essence, that kind of creativity. Because everything is so process driven there to the point where it's like all the manufacturing and everything, they've got access to everything. So they've got access to make everything so perfectly. But when you had garments that had distressing, you could see that there was a very specific type of machine that was designed to make this distressing. It didn't feel real. It felt fake. So it came down to, it's like, this is what I'm talking about, that idea of, coming back, having craft elements into your garments and having that 10%, because that's what these people, and a lot of these manufacturers wouldn't even be able to handle that type of thing because they're not geared up for it. They're geared up for machines. And when you go to a lot of these manufacturers over there as well, you have entire factories that only make men's trousers. And you've got people, and I didn't realize, when you've got the seamstresses over there, you've got different types of seamstresses. The people who can make everything, and they're considered tailor level, they're making good money. Those people are making the equivalent of, like, 30 to 40 pounds an hour, which even here in the UK, that's good. But in that market over there, that's really good money. Some of them at that can do everything at a very high standard. But then you have the people who work in the factories, and some people go their whole careers and they just sew jean pockets because they've become so quick at it and they've become so fast at doing that one very specific technique. That becomes their job. That's kind of the more regular, the people that get put into the production line. It's like, oh, I just do buttonholes, or I just put the buttons on. Like, you see those videos of people, like, you've got like God knows how many hundreds of meters of fabric being thrown through an overlocker, and you've got a guy then he's just throwing it through at rapid speed. And it's like, that's insane, but it's muscle memory as well. So you go and put him on something else. Maybe he can, maybe he's not necessarily. I'm sure that he's in a production line where that's now going on to someone else. I think this is like, you've got, and it's that thing where it's like, you need to understand how all these things work, what types of people there are in the industry, what types of, personalities, what types of everything. And that's something that I've become obsessed with. And a friend of mine telling me, he goes, you just keep going on holidays and going to factories. And I'm like, yeah, become obsessed. I went to Bali with a friend of mine. We ended up in West Bandung, in West Jakarta, and we were going to denim factories, and it was just fascinating. Like, I went to this one there where they'd made all the water from the denim with all the indigo and the dye and everything. They developed their own recycling system, and it was the only part of the factory where we weren't allowed to take photos or videos. And he goes, you can see the water comes through here and it's like blue from all the indigo. And it goes through one filtration system, two filtration systems, like three of these giant silos with all these, I don't even know what it was. But at the end of it, it came out at the end and it went into a koi fish pond. So it was incredible. And he goes, look, these are our koi fish, and it's coming from the water from our denim factory. And you go,
Wow.
so things like that, it's like, wow, that's cool. Like, that's incredible. So I really just have become obsessed with the entire process and just seeing how things are done. Like, India was a different kettle of fish, where that was the hand looms and seeing them working on these like old, old jacquard machines where they would do. I think he was saying, he goes, it would take, it was like 8 hours to make 2 meters of hand embroidered jacquard on the old machines, but you've never seen anything like it. You have one person on a machine, they're like pulling, pushing, pulling, pushing, and then their feet are doing like three different things at the same time, and it's incredible. And there's an organization over there that are trying to preserve that level of craft, but he goes, we can't compete with the jet looms and the power looms that are doing all this embroidery. And it's just like that kind of level of craft is disappearing from the industry because it's just being taken over by, this kind of infrastructure and everything. But
Yeah.
so it was interesting to see that side of it, but then you go to the other side where you got the mega factories, and that's cool. That's something else. And you've got these machines that you put a sleeve on and it stitches it to a blazer perfectly and eases everything, having like like a fully roped sleeve head, and it does it in like 30 seconds. It's like, or like, yeah, it just comes off and it's done. So
Wow.
it's like both sides of it are incredible. Like, so
Hmm.
yeah, it's, and this is when I talk about this idea of obsession. Like, this is what it has become, and that's where fashion department has really stemmed from.
You mentioned using your archive to save time
Yeah.
developing new styles. Is that partly why fashion designers are so obsessed by referencing and collecting and seeking out vintage?
Yeah. So I think the way that people do it is like, they're taking it. So obviously, like when you're going into archives and stuff, and you've got here in London, you've got vintage showroom in
Uh,
the best menswear, well, just archive in general I have ever seen in my life. And it's just like people will hire from there, take the patterns, and then return them. But I'm like, well, why don't I just start building all these shape references up myself? I become obsessed with silhouette. If I see something that I like, I'm going to get one of the pattern cutters that I'm working with and be like, I need that pattern, I need that shape. I just need it in my archive. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I just need it. So if I need a bomber jacket, I've got 10 different bomber jackets to work from. When it comes to the sampling and the pockets, it's like I'm constantly making these little pocket samples and things like that because I've got a wall of them that I haven't even gotten to, that I've just got little sketches that I've just stick it up on the wall when I get a chance. That's when I started to move into laser cutting, because laser cutting gave me a different level of precision that no hand cutting could ever do. So that's when I started to build textile into construction with details. So I was doing a lot of stuff when I was at uni where I was doing laser cutting, but doing layered laser cutting to make it look dense, but to give it depth. So it was that, and that kind of opened up, different type of working as well, where I'm like, wow, I can work with these leathers and I can work with these other, even synthetic materials, and I can do things that you couldn't achieve by hand. And I think that was like my approach to my final year at uni. And I go, I'm never going to be able to compete with the budgets of some of these students. I have to kill them with skill. And I go, even the creative side, creativity is subjective. Some of these people, some of the most talented people I've ever met, I went to school with. But I need to be able to separate myself, and I need to have a skill to be able to. You need a skill to be able to do that, because it's like the way I was working and the way I was thinking. It doesn't matter how much money some of these other, international students were paying. They cannot achieve that because they can't even comprehend the level of skill that I'm putting into this type of textile design and things like that. And that's what I would always tell people. And I'm like, try focus on developing a skill and getting it to a point where you were an expert on it. And I remember speaking to Charles Jeffrey. It's maybe about a year ago, because a friend of mine, she kind of a brand director. I think that's her role there. And anyway, we're talking down and we're talking about this, the students not having enough skills and not having enough focus. And he was saying, he goes, when I was at uni, because we were told if you wanted to work with denim, Make sure that you work with denim to the point that you know everything about it, become obsessive of it. Leather, lingerie, things like that. I try to tell people, I go, just because if I do, wovens, denim and leather, you've got jersey, which is a complete different ball game. You've got lingerie, which is a complete different type of machinery. People have this fundamental idea that is that if you can make one item of clothing, you can make all items of clothing. When it comes to corsetry and, evening gowns and things like that, I understand how it works because I've tried to make a point of it, but could I actually go and make a bespoke evening gown with an internal corset and all those internal structures? No. But that's it. It's like people need to be able to have a little bit more focus when they're working, and people shouldn't necessarily be treating all these different types of the industry, different types of things in the industry as it's just fashion design across the board. I think if people took a step back and actually kind of focus their energy and being like, no, I want to work with leather and I want to know everything about leather. I want to be so skilled in working with leather, because that's the industry that I want to work in. It's like people are chopping and changing too much, and it's like, I understand when teachers are saying you need to try different things, but ultimately you do get those students where they say like, no, I only want to work with this. It's like, just let them point them in the right direction to be able to say like, okay, if you want to be an expert of this, go to this store and speak to this person, see who else they can put you in touch with. And I think now with technology and everything else, and people are losing this ability to just go into places and talk to people. It's still a very old school industry that we work in. When it comes to a lot of these fabric salesmen, thing like that, I go, they're all very old school. They love that personal connection. I get away with murder with some of these people because I'll go in there and just talk. And I think the manufacturers are the same, and I go, people forget that. If you go in there and you're this reserved little cold thing, or if you're cold, or if you're rude, people don't forget that, and people aren't going to do you favors, because at the end of the day, when you need to get things made, it's like people often look down on people in the manufacturing side, on the fabric side. You need to nurture these relationships, because when shit hits the fan, it's not the celebrity wearing your garment who's going to come and save you. It's your suppliers and your network and your manufacturers and those things like that they're the ones that are going to save you to get things over the line. If you're rude, and I've seen it before, I'll have my stuff go to the manufacturers, and 9 times out of 10, he'll cut my stuff first, and he'll put my stuff in front of people whose stuff's already been there for 2 weeks. He goes, she's rude. She comes in there, she screams, she's this and that. And he goes, I'm going to cut yours first because I like you. And, things like that. And I go, and things like that, those are the things that money can't buy. So when you don't have those kind of resources financially, you need to rely on other things. And you need to rely on, and I go, people aren't as personable and things like, anymore across the board. So, yeah.
Something I wanted to ask you: why is it we see so many new brands starting up, and their USP is to create the best basics ever?
Because I think people are now becoming obsessed with, I guess, money as well. People think that they're going to make the best basics because it's commercial, it's easy to move. But ultimately, these basics, when it comes to t-shirts and things like that, you're never going to be able to compete with Uniqlo. Like, Uniqlo, they've got such a huge range covered, and their level of creation and just the amount of money and things like that they've invested in their make. Look at Arc'teryx as well. It's they've got. I was speaking to someone and I was saying what they've actually done. A lot of these places, they invest in the manufacturers that they work with, and they'll actually develop their own facilities within the manufacturing to develop their product further when it comes to bonded and finished seams and things like that. I'm like, Ultimately, it's just this big influx of people wanting to be designers. It's all these celebrity designers and things like that. It's people just wanting to kind of have a foot in the industry, say, I have a brand. That's ultimately what it is. It's like there's a lack of care for the actual clothing itself and people just caring for the brand and the association that fashion has. People forget that, fashion was clothing traditionally was made by lower class people, tailors, everything like that. I go, it was my school in London. It was originally was a trade school. And we were still in the old building, and where we were on the third floor was originally the creche, because the bottom three floors underneath, where you had the women who were going there to sew, and all the children were on the top floor, and they still had the little kids' toilets there, and we used to have to use them, and we'd go to the cubicles, and your elbows are touching both sides. But it was funny. It's like, and we were the year after us got to use that building, I think, yeah. And it was just like, because that's what it was. It was a trade. Fashion was the garment industry was a trade. The design side of it, and everyone wants to come in now and be the creative director and this and that. And yes, it has become a new medium to develop creative direction. So the same as, with anything with the advertising, whatever it may be, it's just that it just so happens to be fabric. And it's like the easiest way to be able to do it, because the thing is, if you're looking in the US as well, you have a lot of these white label companies moving in. So
Yeah.
are you aware of these and what they are?
They make for others.
So they're making for others. So you have a lot of these Vietnamese companies, Chinese companies, and they'll come in with their range, and they'll be like, you can have any of these. We have all the fabrics. All you need to do is pick and choose. And it's as simple as that. You pay them, you're paying top dollar for it, but you're coming out and say, oh, yeah, look, I'm a designer. I've created this range. It's like, no, you haven't. You haven't created anything. You're just picking out of a catalog and putting it with something else. And I hate going on Instagram and seeing these people sitting there with their fabric cards, and they're like, oh, trying to decide, because they've been given, so you need to pick from this fabric card. They haven't gone into a fabric showroom and start to pick things and pull things aside. This could be this could be this, and actually doing the physical creation from scratch. The obsession is owning a brand. There is no obsession with the clothing. You see it. And this is when, I always say, you don't need fashion school to have a brand, but the kind of level of passion that everyone has is that people develop what people put themselves through just to going through fashion school. I developed bold patches by the end of uni. It took about a year to guide two massive bold patches, and it was just the amount of work and stress, and you're putting everything into it, and that only comes from that kind of level. There are people that just do it at home and they're doing it religiously. Even going to university, it is a privilege. But the people that own the brands, those people that have the brands and these basic brands, it's the obsession with having that foot in the industry and saying, I have a brand. That's
I
it.
guess that confirms my suspicions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, coming up for 2 hours, so I won't
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
you much longer. But I didn't thinking back to one of the first of your Instagram posts, I noticed
Yeah.
where you were out fabric shopping and you took along your lighter.
Mm, that was.
Do you find it hard to find good fabrics, or do you find that the contents labels occasionally lie?
They generally lie, not all the time. So you do get people that lie on the retail side. Um, when you're working with mills and things like that, um, they're not allowed to. Like when they're working on the commercial side of it, the direct to consumer stuff, and I think that one specifically it was funny because I was actually looking for a ribbing that had a synthetic material in it, because I was going on a bomber jacket and it was going to be quite tight. And, if you're using 100% natural cotton ribbing, it stretches out and it doesn't have a lot of memory. If you have something synthetic, it's got a lot more memory and it's going to hold shape much better. It's going to be stronger. And I said, and I picked it up, and I go, because I could see it was synthetic. I could see it had like, either acrylic or something in it. And I'm like, and I go, oh, this one here. And I go, oh, this is synthetic. And he goes, no, it's 100% cotton. I go, no, it's not. And look how it shines. And cotton doesn't shine like that. It absorbs the light, especially like this. And he's like, no, it's 100% cotton. You have no idea what you're talking about. Give me the sample. I go, all right, give me a sample, give me a swatch. I walked outside, got the lighter, burnt it, black smoke, crystallizes up, walked back in. I'm like, are you going to tell me that's cotton? And I'm like, where it's been burnt, and I'm cracking it. And I go, that's 100% synthetic. And he's like, no, this and that. Get out. And I'm like, this is the thing. It's like, that was probably where I got that, was on Goldhawk Road in Shepherd's Bush here in London. And that store there specifically, Gold Bricks, is probably meant to be one of the better stores on that street. It's like, so it is very difficult. It's like, there's another one in London called Woolcrest. And I've seen so many people would tell me, it's like, oh, you go there to buy the most amazing fabrics, wools, this and that. And you're looking at them like, I've been in that store a million times. You're being lied to, because they clearly know you have no idea. And they're like, I bought 100% wool and it's £2 a meter.
Oh, sounds cheap.
Yeah, it sounds cheap because it's 90% plastic. So people do because ultimately most people aren't trained and don't have any idea. So that trick with the lighter, and one of my old teacher from Melbourne. So when I was studying in Melbourne, we were forced to study material science. We thought we were going to come into a fashion course where we're learning how to drape and this and that. No, we were doing science. We're learning about the amorphous and crystalline structures of a fiber. And we're sitting there, jaws on the floor, and like, we actually need to learn this. And they forced us. And they made us do burn tests. They gave us fabric samples and they said, identify them by burning. And it's like, my teacher, she follows me from back then. That was like 2015, so 11 years ago now. And she was saying, and I kind of felt like I was in school. And she's like, and what was this? And I go, it burns like this. It should smell like this. And you learn to identify how things smell. It's like, if you burn cotton, it should smell like burnt paper. The way that it acts, the ash, the things like that, all these are important. These aren't things. And, I got to my school in London, and I was, they're like, oh, how do you know all these things? And I go, because we were forced to learn it. Because you get to these bigger schools in London, especially, and you're not taught all these tricks. You're not taught all this type of learning. It's just design. They're design schools. That's what they are. They're art schools.
All right. Now, you did mention when we started that you were getting ready for, was it London Fashion Week?
Yeah. So we leave, so with the brand that I'm working with, so we're leaving on Monday. So we're doing showrooms. So we've got sales appointments. So we're just finishing up the collection. I think I've got to go, 2 manufacturers tomorrow, bags, belts in the morning, then trousers in the afternoon. So it's a little bit everywhere. Then we're shooting lookbook on Friday. So I think for me, it's quite important with the industry to stay active in it, because I see the pace in which it changes, and anything that I can tell people, this is how you should work, it's coming from a place of, it's been tested, because this is how I do it day to day. And it's become an obsession. It's building complexity within a team rather than adding new people. And I think that's something that I try to do quite a lot. I say try to have the few people that we have, train them and get them working in a more complex manner rather than just bringing you. We don't have interns. We have one intern. It didn't work. He was doing a day a week. It's just like we didn't have room for it. So I told him, I go away, learn these skills. You need to learn these things. You need to come out of uni and be at a very specific level with these types of skills, because that's how you're going to break into the industry.
Okay, there we go. Okay, Anthony.
Yeah, that was a lot.
coming up to 2 hours now, and I can hear your voice is starting to get a bit shaky. Yeah. So I'm going to let you get on with things now. Okay, Anthony. thank you so much for joining me today. It
No.
was very educational.
It's good. I mean, it means I'm doing something right, which is good.
Anything we can do to make the world a little better is good, I think.
Yeah.
So, bye bye for now.
No, thank you very much. All right, have a good day. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.